Hello, and a very warm welcome. This is the first ever episode of Ideas and People, and today I have a special guest, Jonas. And Jonas,
Thank you.
tell me, what is what is your idea? What is the idea
My idea about this episode or being
or the
here,
bold statement
your
you
bold statement, all that already. We're going straight on to the hot topic. Yeah, well, what I preach to my clients and the people I meet is speed. And with that said, speed in IP. And with that said, I also meet a lot of startups and SMEs that
Mhm.
linger about a lot on the IP question.
But
And it's
isn't it?
complex. And I say you need to have speed. You need to have sufficient knowledge to have speed.
I mean, we both have our fair share with intellectual property, especially patents, and sometimes it doesn't feel as speed at all. Why is speed so important?
Yeah, that's true, and it's important in the
Mm,
context of getting your filing in your first filing, because we all know how important that filing date is. Uh, and then when you have the filing date, you don't
mhm.
want speed. In most cases, you want it to take time, right? To be able to evaluate your
Mm.
tech, evaluate your business, and see where it's going, and postpone the fees and everything.
Jonas, one thing that why we're actually having this episode is like you shared about your experience that you had with startups, you were presenting, and there you had what are the do's and don'ts and stuff. And what you mentioned was about what is the perspective, what should be the entrepreneurs aware of thinking of their technology and exclusive rights and stuff like that. What should they have there in their mind?
I think they think a lot about the tech when we speak about tech startups, and they were mostly very aware of
Mm,
where they have spent a lot of resources developing their tech. And what I say is, when it comes to IP, that's good. You know that, and there you have a lot of potential. But what you also need to focus, and what you need to focus much more on in the terms of IP, is your business, which they obviously also have a lot of focus on, but not with an IP perspective.
mm. So
Does that make sense?
the thing is like that we had it in our call in our talks prior that where we totally forgot to record even because this was worth already a session. um One thing we spoke about was like the how can I say, is IP domineering all the entrepreneurial decision, because usually when you have the feeling you talk to us IP people and then we come like, yeah, you have to think about IP, you have to discuss everything and therefore IP and it has to follow IP. What is a good way to handle as entrepreneur? On one hand, this topic, the importance, without getting everything influenced by it too much.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've seen it as I've been working as a patent attorney for almost 2 decades, right? And seen from the inside, working in these large IP firms, addressing clients, and we see all these important IP issues. You do, all you other guys here looked at the tendency list. It's most patent attorneys, IP advisors of different kind, and we all see all of these issues that they need to handle. And it's so easy to address, if we not address all of them, 50% of them, because in our world that's the
Mm,
most important thing. And from the entrepreneur side, they want the business going, right?
mm,
And they need to prioritize hard, and we need to be better to put ourselves in their position to see these are the two things. Take action on these, and then you get your business going, or these parts of your business, and then we meet, and then we
mm.
take the next two steps.
I
And I think
mean,
that's so important, because I've been falling
mm,
into that trap so many times previously, that here, you need to do this, you need to do this, and I call them, have you done this, have you done? And at the end it's too much, right?
I mean, we spoke about why it's significant, why you should take care of it. and is that it actually made one of the titles of this episode, which about what is the consequence not being aware of the factors what intellectual property has on your business, and what it turns it out. And therefore, and you said it, there's a difference between having a no, living a dream or living a nightmare. Can you explain?
Exactly. Yeah, I have these two examples that we started with, and we both are, or the horror example or the nightmare is based on experience, and I'm sure that a lot of you guys listening to this will recognize this. Do we have now a question to you? Just a more administrative case. Do we have an interaction? Can we see some reactions in the chat or something somewhere?
I need to check. Sorry.
That would be lovely if everybody to get that chat going right where they are located. Where do we have the audience from?
So I just see it's also
Because
this
I
first
also
time
have some
using this
questions
software, and the chat.
that
There's
I would
just
love to get in from you. I speak,
yeah.
you check that, and I speak, and I've
Yeah.
so please everybody write in the chat, and then Ricardo will see that when that pops out. If it's possible to use some of these emoji symbols, give him a heart as well for just arranging this. I'm so excited to be here and be able to be the first guest, and I'm looking forward to all your other guys to take care to gain all your knowledge onwards. But the horror example I was speaking about with Ricardo, and he's also mentioned in the invite here, comes from it was a contact person of mine that I've been working with previously, and he called me up and said, "Hello, Jonas, need your help. I've now started a new position, or a couple of months ago, on this as a CEO on this new company. And when I got invited or presented with this opportunity, they also showed me the tech and what the product they wanted to put on the market, and this was all excited. And since we have been discussing previously, I also checked their IP. I checked that they had some patent applications going and patents on this product, on this technology. Now I see first thumb up. Thank you, Christoph. Very nice to have you here. And I said, that's great. And he said, well, but now we have a problem. We put this product on the market. We had a huge success. We're selling already the first month now for 10 million Swedish crowns. And we see before the end of year, we will have 40 millions in revenue and sales from this product, which is great. But already now, in 3 months, we have a copy on the market. And we see that they are cheaper. And we see that they have copied our tech. And now we want to get those patents working. I'll say, all right, let's have a look on it. So I cleared my schedule for the morning afterwards and promised him to call him in lunchtime. Said and done. I'm sitting there the morning afterwards and studying the patents from a first perspective. The patents was there, the tech was there, looked good. When I started analyzing those claims, I saw that they didn't really match what was out on the market, the product they actually had.
So wait a minute. When I understand it correctly, you're saying they spending a couple of thousand, I think euros, or in Swedish crowns is times 7, and
More.
then actually because there was this different functions of a patent. Can you why you should do a patent? Can you tell?
Yeah, so the patent is protecting your technology, so technical innovation.
Yeah, one thing, protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want that to protect your product you put on the market. So it's in the essence, you don't want to protect your tech, you want to protect your revenue.
Yeah.
And your investment in that technology.
So now you just discovered that intention was blown out of the wind, was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, as more as I investigated, from a first glance, it
Mm.
looked good. Looking at the description, the abstracts, the of
Yeah,
the patent applications and the granted patents look good. Well, that's the product, and the patents are about that. Analyzing the claims, though, seeing that there were limitations that I couldn't find in the product. So that was the bad feeling was rising, and I had to have in lunchtime have this calling him up. Didn't feel good at all. I'm sorry,
mm.
we can't do much about this because it doesn't match. And it was bad for me. It's even worse for him, obviously, sitting there and
Mm.
seeing the revenue going down. He can't do anything about it, even though the company had invested in patents. And we discussed what that could be from. And we, in our investigation onwards, we saw that, well, the product was here, and the patent attorney did their work, looking on the product, understanding that, claiming that. But then onwards, the patent attorney did their work, and the client did their work, adjusting the product so it actually fitted the market. And the patents went onwards in another direction to get them granted. And
Mm.
the communication and the knowledge gap obviously were somewhere between this organization and the IP world too large, so they didn't
What
understand each other.
what would be your is there a quick fix, or at least something we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think from if we look from the client perspective,
Mm.
the clients need, I think it's they need to understand that what is discussed at the first meeting when you draft or when you file your patent application, that's not your granted patent. And I've
Mm.
met that. This is one example, but I've seen that so many times. And clients come, well, we patented that. Well, in the report here and there, we saw the claims got in this direction, but that doesn't go through. And I think it's on the client side from these companies not having the IP patent department and in-house IP knowledge. They need to understand how the rights developing to grant. Right? They need a knowledge
Mm.
raise, and they need to understand that you can't outsource your IP to that extent that you don't need to do anything. You always need to know what you have and what gets granted. And I think from
Mm.
a patent attorney side or advisor side, we need to be much better in explaining what is happening. If we
Can I
write in a
point it
report,
as because I had back then I had even my own business, which was in the IP field, no, yes, but we tried to get a patent protection for a kind of patent summary that we did, and I learned very fast something, and I want to comment on you on this, which is, do you know this joke? Which is it true that the first question is free? And the patent attorney answers, yes. What's your second question?
yeah,
And you
totally
mentioned
agree.
about the knowledge transfer, and I think here also, to be fair, patent attorneys, at least in Germany, there's roughly like 4,000 people which are registered as patent attorneys, which means there's always too few people available. And
Same in
how
Sweden.
to get this thing in a fair thing where a client gets educated and the patent attorney still can live from that, because every time he's not charging for it, he may lose money or is not making enough money. Therefore, it's depend. I understand, but do you have an idea, or what's your take on that with your solo petition with your own law firm?
Now, there was a glitch somewhere in the stream, so I didn't get the full question. Could you repeat that, please?
Oh, my question was, what is your take or tip on that? That a user, that the law firm on one hand, or the attorney, needs to make money, so they charge perhaps per hour, and on the other hand, the client needs education, and how to, because what I saw sometimes is like every time I called that person, he was charging me. I was really like afraid calling him.
Yeah. I know, and I met clients as well that said, "Well, I don't answer when my patent attorney calls me because I know the clock is running." And then they start speaking about what the weather is and what I did this weekend, and I just hang up. And I would say that's a problem from our business. We have business models that doesn't really work fully today in all settings. And so I think we need a competence raise on the client side, and that's part what I'm addressing in my firm right now. But we also need understanding the difference between clients. Now I'm speaking from my experience as a patent attorney and advisor in Sweden, and I see how the setting is. We have a business landscape with a couple of really large corporations. You probably know a couple of them, like IKEA, Volvo, two large Volvo companies, Ericsson, Atlas Copco, and so on, SKF, and all of these that are very experienced. And Ericsson, probably one of the best IP departments in the world in making revenue from their IP. And the IP industry have grown up much from serving these clients. So they have system and processes serving these clients because that's 50% or more of their revenue. And it's a secure revenue because the work keeps coming, and it keeps coming in very clear packages. Do this, do that. We are doing what we are experts on. And then we have the other parts and all the SME companies that are the other 50%. And they are not these experienced purchasers of these services. And there we need an adjustment how we can work with these. And I think also in terms of business setups, we actually can charge for teaching them or handling it more from the inside of their as an internal IP manager, to get that knowledge and be able to challenge them on, is this really the scope of your product right now? And that potentially is a totally new service. Maybe you don't need to be in a registered patent attorney to do that. Maybe you can hire someone else that is very skilled in business and teach them to understand the IP lingo and be able to work inside the client. And that's more or less what I do now in my firm, working as a fractional IP leader.
For example, in Germany, we have a company which is operating in that field, which basically rents out IP managers or so, IP project thing. Well, the company name was Good IP. I have no affiliation, so therefore everything's fine. But I think your point of there's this need for IP management, I see it too. And you mentioned to me in our pre-chat a very interesting figure about the IP awareness, if I understand it correctly, in Sweden.
Yes.
And
well, it's actually a study. I think it's from World Intellectual Property Organization, or if it's from EU IPO. That's so hard to pronounce. Can you do that?
EU IPO?
Yeah.
You just need to have a little break.
Yeah, that's all right. And that says, so they interviewed like 25,000 people in the whole EU to understand their knowledge and awareness about IPR. So it came out, and the average knowledge, or 82% of these people said they had good knowledge about IPR. So that's the average in the whole EU. And the country coming out the best was Portugal. As I haven't understood it, they actually have IPR education in school, so on an early level in their educational system. And obviously from Sweden, I'm interested, where is Sweden in this? Do anyone in the chat, or you, Ricardo, want to?
I know already the answer.
So you know the answer already.
I'm
So
not allowed
I
to.
understand we have like 30 seconds lag on the chat, but if we want, so but this is a very interesting number, and you should take in consideration when it comes to innovation. And the most innovative countries in the world, Sweden mostly are one of the top 3 countries. And that ranking is based on how many patent applications are filing and the support systems and a lot of different factors. Anyhow, in this, so that there Sweden ranks very high. And in this average knowledge about IPR, Sweden came out last in the whole EU,
Oh
with
my.
42% saying that they have a good understanding of what IPR
Mhm.
is.
What
For
is
me,
IPR
then,
by the way? Because you used
yeah,
the
that's
abbreviation, we
intellectual
didn't.
property rights. So that's are the registered rights,
Mhm.
you could say. There are also so the registered rights like patents, trademarks,
Mhm.
design rights, but also the copyright that's not registered but just
Yeah.
is you have when you create, and also
So basically,
trade
as
secrets.
understood, your teaching is in high demand. But what is about? Do people actually pay for that?
Yeah. So
I mean,
what you could
they
say,
will later pay with the nightmare for it if they don't have it, for sure. That's what I
yeah.
understand. But is there
But
like, okay, people are interested in spending?
so when you talk to tech
Mhm.
startups and the incubators, they understand the need, but they understand there is a need to work with IP, but they don't really understand what it means and what they can do for the startups in terms of, in short
Mhm.
terms, in terms of getting funding, or in long term, in terms of actually building a control position for their business. They have a relative understanding that actually, well, if we don't protect, somebody can copy it, uh, but that's about it. So yes, there is a demand, but I think there's also a threshold because the demand is so high, so most people don't have realize
Mhm.
that they have the need and how large the need is. So I get a lot of interest, and I've filled my quote what
Mhm.
I have in time of resources to work as a fractional IP leader, uh, and I have wanted to make a
Mhm.
larger impact on this field because I see the need is so crucial and it can make such a large difference for these companies. So then I have started, and the last half of year, most of my time have gone to building an IP course for startups that then eventually I also will expand to be even more specific to SME companies. And yes, I've just started to sell it the last months, and selling is another type of skill,
Mhm.
obviously. I see a demand, a lot of interest, and I have a couple of sales and discussions with those clients buying
Mhm.
in on that course, and have got very good feedback. So
I mean,
that's cool. So that it's I think there's a lot to do, and there is a possibility for me and for anyone else that wants to pursue this opportunity.
what I think is like this: there's the competition in form from the offices and also others providing content in this space, but and therefore also with startups. I remember back then I was trying to address my services towards startups to get fundings and this and to do
Exactly.
funding related searches. And then I learned one thing, and that was that startups are very tricky to work with because somehow they have this mentality of, hey, give it for free. I'm a tiny startup, give it for free,
Exactly.
do it less. And therefore, and often it's like this, they get so many stuff for free. That's not the point. I think also like what is very interesting, at least for German, I can speak about the German startup market. They are very well aware about they need a patent. But if you talk to them for what reason,
Yeah.
there becomes interesting. And the first thing, in my opinion, is like I have to impress an investor. And the second is protection of business. And therefore, I don't know, is this in Sweden the same way? Do the startups come like, okay, I need a patent somehow, and therefore I want to patent my sausage, not the recipe or so, my sausage selling business, to make it even more literal. But there's no technology inside. Therefore, can you? Sorry.
Yeah, definitely, and there's a demand for that, and I
Mhm.
think that's definitely a legit way to use IP. And if you
Mhm.
do it and to just have it as a fog curtain
Mhm.
to not disclose that you don't have much in the company, well, that's a moral question,
Mhm.
and if you want to take that assignment or not. But to use IP to also attract
Mhm.
investor uh, interest,
Mhm.
I think that's good. You should definitely do that. When I see in Sweden, when we look at these early investors,
Mhm.
they don't have the knowledge either. They, the ones I've spoken to, what do you ask in terms of IP? And well, I ask, do you have a patent? And yeah, and they say yes. And I say, well, next question, because they don't know what's the follow-up question is they should ask or how they should do it.
Oh, now
So
you
that's,
made a good point for what is the follow-up question? What
well,
should be as investors now? All people investing in startups should listen.
well, first, what is your patent protecting? Or is it granted or not? Is it application? What is it protecting? Can you explain to me what parts of your technology or your patent actually is protecting? So you don't get into this nightmare that you think you have something that is protected, because then it doesn't help. So what is it protecting? And how will that
Mhm.
drive value in your business? How does it link to your revenue stream,
I mean,
or your planned revenue stream then for most startups?
now we're speaking about the business of making money. That's good. Now, another, I think, perspective investors have is the risk angle, which means like, okay, how much risk is there? And one imminent risk, in my opinion, is always the intellectual property rights landscape. And now, what's your take on that? What do you have an advice for investors how to understand if the startup actually has taken care of this aspect of what we call freedom to operate?
Yeah. I try to avoid freedom to operate, because I guess you or no one else would ever say you have freedom to operate, because you never know. There could be so many things that's not discovered,
Mhm.
independently how much time you spend. Uh, and I like to speak about control and risk. How large
Mhm.
is the risk? And how much does it cost to lower the risk?
Mhm.
And what are on stake, right? And in these early stage startups, well, do some kind of search. You probably have three competitors. What do they have? Where could it be? Do it on a mental level. Maybe it's sometimes you don't even need to search the companies as such. Do they
But I
have
mean,
these
now as
benefits?
investors, we're still in this investor,
Yeah,
this
but
interviewing.
as an investor, you want to investigate what they know. And for an investor, I would say the business risk, investing
Mhm.
in a startup, that's the large risk. That's the
Yeah.
real large risk. And it's more likely that the startup you invest in never make any revenue at all, doesn't give you a coin back. And then asking the startup to spend a lot on make sure that the product that potentially never comes to market and doesn't infringe anything
Mhm.
else, I would keep that low. I will ask the question as an investor, what do others have? How do you assess this? And what's your plan when you keep developing? Or do you
Mhm.
know, are there any key IP that you are aware of? That they are aware of the IP risk and how they will handle it onwards? I would say, as an investor, that would be more interesting for me than that they had done a full
Mhm.
freedom to operate at this stage.
It's been now very
How do
interesting.
you?
I spoke to investors of the IT space, And for them, it was very interesting. They said they have lower interest in IP rights, of own IP rights. More for them is important is the business risk low on risk as possible, which means they expect, especially if there's tech involved, that somehow they at some point of time they checked. They understand it's okay that sometimes it's you can't do it with, as you mentioned, it can cost a ridiculous amount of money to do it. And as you said, and even then there you will never have the full picture. But he said like, hey, that's what they expect. When we do business with you, I want to see that you did the due diligence to actually go through what's there. And in Germany, even, it's mandatory by law. If you have a limited company in Germany, there's written like, hey, you have to act compliant, and one compliant is willingly respect the rights of others.
Yeah.
Therefore,
But
and
that's also
most
broad,
startups,
willing respect the rights of others. What does
mm,
it's clear what that means, but it doesn't stipulate how much you need to investigate. That's also
mm,
a part. The more you investigate, the more likely is it that you find something. So yeah,
yeah, but the thing is like,
and
you want to do you want to find something? That's a good question. And therefore this is like,
yeah, and speak.
mm,
So I think that's, for me, that's something, a knowledge that you
mm,
need to build up over time. And if you're here and I have 2 years of
mm,
development until my product is done and I can put it
mm,
on the market, you don't know I what you need to know here in terms of
mm,
which IP I should need to
yeah,
avoid, because it's not developed yet.
mm,
So you need in the beginning have an overview. Where do we have the large players, and you need to know do we have a large player that will be our competitor. That IP I want to know. Do we have, because that large player, that business I plan to take, that one you can be sure will be aggressive with its IP if you come there and try to steal
yeah,
their business. If you have a player you're using tech from another field, or that you get inspired of, and you see,
mm,
here's a player, this patent is
mm,
relevant, could be relevant for us, but this, as far as we see, as far as we know, this company does
mm,
something else. They going in this direction from everything we know. That, well, we should be aware of that patent, but we shouldn't do everything to avoid it, because that would
mm,
probably be cheaper to buy in than that from the direct competitor. That would probably also be
mm.
someone that is much less aggressive and saying, hey, you infringing us, let's buy a license. And they settle it and it goes onwards. And you can initiate that yourself
So
much easier than towards the direct competitor that will keep their ground.
now we come back to something you said in the very beginning, which was, IP is not about having a patent right or something like that. It's not about that you have a granted patent. It's about protecting a market share. And now you're telling like, hey, be aware. No, at some point in time, you will compete for a market share. Those competitors, they will fiercely fight because they don't want to share, perhaps. And other ones, like the enabler, like suppliers who have part of the technology, they would be more willing to say, oh, you are interested in my technology. Congratulations, you increase my market share. I'm very
Exactly.
happy to provide you with a license. Or if you, and you can explain this better than myself, when I actually buy in something, not the license, I mean actually a good, a physical part of it, do I still need to license their patent?
So let's just recap that so I understand that correctly. So I buy a physical. I need for my device. I
Yeah.
need this Bluetooth transmitter.
For example, one part,
Yeah,
one
yeah,
component,
yeah.
which I would.
For example, I need that component, and with
Mhm,
that product, the license comes with it
mhm.
normally. But there's probably others that are much more
I wouldn't do it
experts
so
in
so
that field.
so.
But that's
Mhm.
I would say yes.
I wouldn't do it so complicated. This is a typical make or buy decision. So you have a product, which often products have multiple components, and one component there's a patent on, and I can either buy that component or I can make it myself. Therefore, when I make it myself, I have to license. That's clear. And what is when I buy it from that person who has the patent?
So the interesting thing here is because you might buy it from someone that has the license to produce it as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
And what's important to think of here is that you use it the way is it intended to use. If you don't, you potentially infringe someone's patent, right? So that could be that you buy in this tech and it's protected, but you get the license to use it as it was intended. But you discover by tweaking this, and you do something else.
Yeah,
And
but
there could be
this is too much. Therefore, don't be too much in that case. What I want to say is like, hey, they buy the stuff in from someone who is who's the rights holder or licensee, and then with that purchase from the rightful owner,
yes,
I don't have to care anymore because basically that person give me with that
yeah,
license.
exactly. Yeah.
Difference is I do my stuff myself, then I make and negotiate. Therefore,
Exactly.
you are already 1, 2, 3, 4 steps behind. Like,
Okay.
hey, put it to
Yeah.
different use, which is again a startup way and move. So that's a good one.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Now, okay, we were investor questions. The first question was, okay, do you have a patent? No, and what does this patent? What are protecting? Second question was, okay, what you
Yeah, and
do for
actually, I
risk?
would expand that question to what IP do you have? Because we saw, and I think we discuss patents so much because from a startup perspective, patents cost a lot. But just as important, I would say, are the trade secrets.
Trade secrets? Okay.
So it's not just a question as an investor, do you have patents, do you have trade secrets, and do you have IP in the log system? How do you handle IP, right?
Thank you, Dennis.
Lovely to hear, Dennis. And anyone having that gives us energy, so please keep commenting, or if you have questions that we want to discuss, love it. So well, yeah, do you have IP? What IP do you have? So you put it in the larger context, not just focusing on patent, because patents are very important, especially for a tech startup. But a lot of parts can be controlled, but patents are not the right tool to use.
As you also mentioned, in terms of like you have this uncertainty about your product, your final product. That makes sense perhaps to later. But here we're talking again something you made with your bold statement, where we'll not let you go easily. No? How does trade secrets behave in terms of speed?
Well, they're
Because you
very
said on one
speedy
hand
because
speed, no, to file soon.
and that's and I stay with that. You need speed to file soon, but it's something that you can keep secret, and you think it's relevant to keep secret. Well, then obviously you need to keep it secret from the beginning, and as long as you want to use that as a trade secret, that could postpone and you can keep your inventions as trade secrets until you have funding to file. But you always have a risk, right? A period of risk when you don't have file that somebody else is faster than you. That's why you need a speed. But there are also parts that if you are especially if you have a product that's hardware and it's software that is, and you have control of your software. So the user, even the experienced user, doesn't know what is going on behind the scenes. It's in the cloud, on your controlled cloud service. So nobody knows what's happening. And that potentially is much better to keep a trade secret, but you use the patents to cover the overall picture, or the parts that actually can be seen and discovered from a competitor or user.
If you allow me there, another very detailed question. Be
Yes.
careful. What I often see with startups is this: they do very large filings in terms of disclosure, which means in this patent application, They're nearly the whole business model. They're nearly all aspects of the products there.
Yeah.
What is your take on? Is this what are the consequences with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think in terms of that, because you get that question, can't we put in also this and this in the patent application? Because then we can have everything for one patent application. And I think that's also something from our industry to take on. Yes, we do that, but we do a lot of effort to put everything in, so we have backup, follow-up, or you can do divisional applications on that original application, but we don't charge sufficiently for it. But it's also the problem with that you discover that you get a claim at the end that is this large, but you have disclosed so much as you are indicating. So it's so much in the disclosure, and then you can't keep it secret, and you can't file application onwards on that subject matter if you have expanded that, or you have much more limited scope on because you have already disclosed so much in your original application. So I recommend to keep the applications. I want to protect this, then keep the applications lean, keep the cost small, and keep other parts, if possible, as a trade secrets, and file a new one, because the large cost is not the filing costs, it's your attorney.
Yeah.
And so, and you will be better off when it comes crucial on the market if you have a portfolio than if you have one patent.
One very interesting thing you said was like there's like the claimed matter and there's the disclosure. Can you explain for someone who's not so used into patents what's the difference?
Yeah, and here it becomes quite nitty-gritty, because it's funny, because the more you disclose, the more detail you disclose, to some extent, about the tech you want to protect, the broader scope of protection you can get.
Yeah, but this is
So that's a counterintuitive,
just
right?
in general first. No? To give just in general first. What is the difference between disclosure and client matter?
Okay, sorry.
Therefore, you are already on
the
the
disclosure
level.
is the whole application, right? So you describe the background. What's our problem? And I think here it's also important to work with the story and describe the problem from a business perspective.
Okay.
Even so, because that will help you getting, even though you have made small advantages, you can build up this urge that this needs to be solved, even though the technology shift is very, very small, right? So that's a disclosure in that you describe your tech, how it functions mechanically or physically, and then what effects it gets. What are the advantages of your technology? And there you have the whole disclosure. And that also includes the claims. And the claims are what defines your scope of protection. Was that better?
Yeah.
Was that
so
what you
when I
were
understand
after?
it correctly, so you can disclose as much as you want, but it's not what you get protected. That's what in the claims written.
Yeah. So you can have claims directed to this camera in the cell phone to make it smaller and take in light very good. But you can also describe a coffee cup in your disclosure. It won't help, and they probably would tell you to strike it out sometime because it doesn't make sense. But that's the difference. Yes.
And now to follow up on that, what you mentioned before, the claims, they are influenced by the disclosure in terms of the scope. Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So starting there again, the claims you want potentially as broad claims as possible. Broad is good because it gives you a large scope of protection. Broad is bad because it also gives you a lot of prior art that could potentially remove or being a problem for your application. But to a certain extent, you want a broad claim within your tech area, at least. And to get a broad formulation, like I have a fastening means, which could be a screw, it could be glue, it could be it could be a tape or anything, putting one thing to another.
Yeah.
But to be able to claim that, I need to describe in the description that it can be glue, I must give the examples of what are the different alternatives are. If I throughout the description have always used glue, it could very much be that also in the claims, even though I have written an attachment means, that will be interpreted as glue.
Yeah.
So that's why that's a difference, and that's why you need to have substance in the description. That doesn't mean you should describe all your business. You should stuck to the topic that you want to protect.
Mm-hmm. And now, coming with that, I think nowadays a lot of startups think like, hey, I can do with AI very easily write my own patent. I don't need this patent attorney anymore. This ruthless
Adana.
sharks which charge too much money. Yeah. And now coming with the point of the enabling disclosure. Can you explain why this is so important? What is when my claim
I
and my
saw this. Got this positive feedback in the chat, and I saw that, and I totally lost your question, Ricardo. Thank you, Adana. So you have to repeat that. When somebody gives me a bit positive feedback, and my attention was just drawn to that instead. Sorry.
You're flustered and diverted
I got flattered,
easily.
And distracted. Yeah.
No worries. What I was speaking about is that startups nowadays, because it's especially for startups, using the advantages of the artificial intelligence tools is so good. It helps you with a lot of things and speeds you up. And one thing, and I even saw it on a conference from a professor where he was like, write the patents with AI. That's good enough and very good and so good, and you don't need, and it's fine enough, and do it yourself. And you were just putting a little bit of light about the topic of enabling disclosure. What else could you do wrong? No, very easily you're not spot directly in terms of
of AI and patents.
Drafting it yourself, therefore.
Yeah, first, I used to say, or I still say, a patent that you have drafted yourself, it's not worth the money it's printed on if you print it. Well, so don't print your patent that you have patent application that you have drafted yourself. But of course, I think with ChatGPT you probably can get out a decent claim, and but you have other problems. You have the disclosure problems. If you use an open AI, you will get out. It probably have disclosed it already. And I'm looking forward to somebody else, the one that will be affected of this, but doesn't know it yet. The first case where we have a patent that is not granted due to a novelty found in some AI learning, because the person, the inventor, had used an AI that was using that for learning itself as a learning feedback.
You mean the resurfacing?
Yeah. So it's resurfacing, because today, as you say, businesses are developing a lot with the help of AI and with speed, and using AI to do you know an algorithm doing this, asking that, and you get a deep research and you get a lot of data, and well, I'm something on the track, and you keep developing with help of AI. Well, I found a open space here, what can I do? And you get feedback, and so that will happen. But in terms of drafting your patent application, if we look that aside, that it could be accidentally disclosed, and you're using
but I mean, even more on the really like craftsmanship stuff.
Yeah. So you're using that as a tool, and you have it offline. You have it on your own computer, so it doesn't spread the data.
But
I'm convinced that IP drafting, I only use AI. Actually, I don't draft myself, but I use a service having AI in the background to draft patent applications. So I can review them.
Wait a minute. I'm just speaking about the layman who does it themselves.
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
Yeah, okay, of course.
I'm coming. Patience.
I'm so impatient.
And that's an AI, and with a person that actually controlling that AI, because that person is an expert, both patent attorney and expert in that AI
Mhm.
software, only dedicated in drafting patents. It doesn't come out perfect. Doesn't come out good enough. I always need to give feedback. This needs to be added. This should be a bit different. Otherwise, we misses the goal.
Mhm.
And that's why it doesn't help you. You probably you get use it yourself as a layman, and you will probably have sufficient to get a filing date to just say I have a patent pending, no problems. To have a patent that you actually the patent you need when it's crucial, when you have your product in the market and the competitors are gathering. I wouldn't trust it on that. Then you
100%.
need the expert hand to actually see that you get the patent you want and or the patent you need.
In the same direction, the next question, are the all patent, is it like this that I can get a world patent so easily? Because I do one with, and
No.
then it's like what is written there counts also as well for US and for other countries.
That's I tried to make this brief and fast
Mhm.
and comprehensible. So you file your first patent, and that you can file in Sweden, Germany, US, and that's your priority filing.
Yeah.
So that's a common way to do it. Or you file this PCT application, that's Patent
Yeah.
Cooperation Treaty, or what's also commonly referred to as an international patent application.
Yeah.
And that sounds, and when you heard that as a layman, you think international patent application? Well, it eventually becomes an international patent, but it doesn't. So
Yeah.
that's important to remember. So the international patent application is actually a system to get a search and a review and an opinion on your patent application that is not one-to-one followed by
Mhm.
the national patent authorities, but gives you an indication in what direction it goes. And it postpones your costs of filing these national patent
Yeah.
applications. And that is from your priority date. Remember the first filing, that is 2.5 years ahead. A bit
And
different months, a bit difference about different months there
Mhm.
in different countries. And that then you need to
Mhm.
take a decision. Am I going to US? Do I go to Europe, which is not a national but a regional patent application then? And
Yeah.
there are some others of those as well.
And as understood it then, after that phase, just the prosecution in that country starts, which means the initial text and everything which is written there with all the good stuff that you may put there is subject to national law,
Yeah.
which means here is again, it doesn't fit all. It has to be then tailored. So, and also there's like,
Yeah. And that's on the claim sides mostly that you need to do that. Essentially, you should think of it the priority filing. What you file that is what you have.
and
But here's the fine thing. What I use to a lot of clients, I recommend a Swedish priority filing. Swedish since we're in Sweden, but also
Mhm.
since the Swedish patent office, they give you an office action.
Yeah.
They have the ambition to do it within 6 months, but they do it most certainly within 9 months. That is within good
Mhm.
of 1 year. You have developed your tech. You have got a response to search and see in which direction does it lead. Do I need to enforce anything? Can I add anything? Because within the first year, you can actually add things to the PCT, the international patent application that you file within a year.
Mhm.
That you can enforce based on that knowledge, because that is crucial information you get from that first search. And based on that, you see here we have 3 other prior file applications that are public. And based on these, we see, well, we should
Mhm.
enforce our application. We should enforce our application
Mhm.
here. We should add content. We should take a position to actually be able to argue against these three publications that we didn't know of before.
So, because
And you,
Jonas, I have a bad news for you. If you look at the time, we are already close to the end of the stream.
oh yeah,
So you see how much
we
fun.
never came to the dream example.
Yeah. Maybe if there's enough thing, we invite you for a second episode, like in episode 11 or 12. To have some
That's a great
time for
cliffhanger. And in episode 11 or 12,
Mhm.
I take that for granted now. You will meet a dream example, something that you can actually withdraw a lot of inspiration from to build IP and use IP as a business tool to actually create your market instead of just sitting and waiting and see what's happening. Yeah.
I think one very important learning from what you said to me was like, be aware which role you want to play with the patents. Shall it be the smoke screen, or is there protection? There are even other functions like marketing or so, which is okay. But to have this clear idea about this, then another thing that I really like was self-written patents as a layman are not even worth the paper. So it's not about you can file yourself and can use with AI. We don't want to prevent it, but if it has to count, use professionals. Just pay the money, because
Definitely.
otherwise the money is burned anyways. And the third one, what I really liked, was for investors. No, the thing like how to spot a good patent, to understand what it was they actually claimed. Is it matching the product and the
And I
business?
think and I think it's important that the startup founder or whoever you speak to the startup, they need to know that.
Yeah.
They need to be able to answer that question. Otherwise, it doesn't help if they have 10 patents if they can't relate it to their tech and their business.
So the startup founders need to understand how the protection work.
And obviously, the investor shouldn't take all the words for granted, but
Yeah.
they both need to understand that.
And now,
Investigate that.
what I always do, when people want to get in contact to you, how do they find you, except for LinkedIn now?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is good, and there you also find my contact email, and I think that's very good. And if and the link to my homepage, that's ipstudying.com, and from there you can also book a meeting, which
Oops.
I love to have if you want to discuss IP and how you can excel in that. And always nice to have good IP discussions. So you're invited. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jonas. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
It's been lovely.
So I checked in the chat. There's, except for Brace, there are no questions. So wait a minute. I want to be in the big screen
Nice to
again.
see you there again. Lovely.
That was in a little tiny corner in the thing, because the floor was yours. So thank you very much for tuning in. This was Ideas and
Been a
People
pleasure.
episode 1 with Jonas. So 11 and 12, Jonas is back again here. So looking forward that you may tune in again. And thank you a lot for your attention, and stay innovating. Bye-bye.
Bye.